So this video is about how to get your dog to stop biting. Basically, what you want to do in a nutshell is figure out why your dog is biting and teach your dog that these things or these contexts, these situations are not actually that serious, they're not that bad, and it doesn't require a bite. Um, Dogs don't do things just for the hell of it. They don't do things because they think that there are other options. They do whatever is the most energy efficient way for them to be the most healthy, best dogs they can be in this world. So your dog is biting because they think that they have no other option, that that's the best way for them to accomplish what they need to accomplish. Um, Usually, biting has more to do with creating distance between them and whoever they are biting, as opposed to actually an intent to do harm to that other person or dog or whatever. Um, so for this reason, it's really important to understand that uh, that that we need to figure out what is setting your dog off. So what are your dog's triggers, and what are your dog's signals that they're giving you to tell you that they're working up to a bite. Um, when you figure out what your dog's triggers are, you want to use that knowledge to make sure that you're not putting your dog in a situation where they're constantly having negative experiences with these triggers. Because what you're going to want to do is basically systematically desensitize and counter condition them to these triggers. So desensitize them to them, making them feel like they're really not that big of a deal, and ideally actually make them feel like they might actually be good things by counter conditioning them and having them have positive emotional responses instead of fearful ones or frustrated ones or whatever they're having currently, which is leading them to bite. Um, so uh, Understanding your dog's triggers can be tricky. How clear the triggers are is a factor that we use to assess how dangerous a dog is. If a dog's triggers are very, very clear, if they bite only when you take an item away from them, that's a good thing, because that we know clearly that is the trigger that makes your dog bite. If you just don't know when a dog is going to be triggered, or if they just have a ton of triggers, that makes a dog a little bit more dangerous, because we can't predict when we're going to set them off. So you want to identify what your dog's triggers are and control them. Make sure that you're not exposing them to these triggers in ways that they can't handle. Because desensitization is going to require that we expose them to these triggers on a very, very diluted level at first, so that they can slowly learn a different emotional response to them. For example, if your dog is biting when you take something away, what you'll want to do is you'll want to approach while they have something, toss something a million times better, and walk away. Don't even go near what they have. Just start to have them understand that you coming near them when they have something is always a really good thing. When they start to wag their tail and look visibly happy, when you start to approach them with their food bowl or whatever it is that they're guarding, then you know you can take it a little bit further. But it's it's not necessarily a slow process at all, but it is based on your dog's signals. So that's step 2, is understanding your dog's signals. Because A, that's important in avoiding bites, but it's also important in training, because if your dog is giving you signals that they're uncomfortable during the training, that means that your training is actually having the opposite effect. You're sensitizing them, you're giving them more reasons, more experiences of being uncomfortable around the trigger than less. So dogs can have very, very subtle signals. Dogs are very, very communicative using their body language. So a lot of their signals can be very subtle, and they think they're perfectly clear. But if you're not trained to see these signals, then you might not know what they are. You might not see them, and you might not be able to respect them. And you might be teaching your dog that, you know what, these signals aren't enough, and you need to escalate to a bite, because a bite is something that everyone understands. So sometimes there's a growl, which is very clear, and that you can respect. And it's always, always necessary to respect the growl, because you want to teach them you don't have to take it any further than that. I hear you. Because dogs don't do things just for the hell of it. They do things because they feel that they have to. So if your dog is growling, your dog really feels like that's the only way to do what they need to do right now. So punishing them is not really appropriate in this situation. Not to mention, it's just going to erode your relationship and make your dog even more stressed out and more likely to bite in the future. So never punish the growl. Respect the growl. Look for smaller signs. One smaller sign is a tense jaw or lip licking when they haven't just eaten. Another sign is shaking off. That's a sign of stress. Tension or piloerection, or what's called hackles, or when your dog gets that kind of mohawk, that's another sign. Another sign that a lot of people miss is avoidance. If your dog is actively avoiding something, keeping their head averted, maybe sniffing around on the ground when there's not really anything to sniff, they're kind of just like pretending it's not there and hoping that it doesn't require a confrontation. So avoidance is an active stress behavior. It doesn't mean that they just don't care and they're totally fine. So it's very important to know the difference between avoidance and a dog that actually does not care. So yes, so know your dog's triggers so that you can avoid putting them in situations where they are experiencing those triggers as bad things. Learn your dog's signals so that you can also avoid putting them in situations where they're not going to be successful, and also so that you can train them properly. And the last step is the actual training step, which is desensitization and counter conditioning. So this is where you might want to get some professional help or do some reading up on your dog's particular triggers, because how you do this can vary, but the basic formula is exposing your dog to their triggers at a diluted level so that they can perceive them, not have a negative emotional response, and you can pair them with food so that they start to anticipate that those triggers are going to make them feel good feelings, the good feelings that food makes them feel. So lots and lots and lots of repetitions of trigger at a distance or diluted trigger, however you do that, paired with food. It's as though you're trying to desensitize a person to spiders. If a person's really, really afraid of spiders, you can, have a spider very, very far away, maybe in a box or something, and the person can see the spider very far away, not feel upset about it, and maybe get a hug from someone, so that next time they can kind of, they can feel like maybe I can get a little bit closer to the spider and it's not so bad. And then if every time they see a spider you give them $100, then guaranteed the person's going to start really liking spiders after a while. So it's the same kind of idea with dogs. Yep, so that's that. Identify triggers, know your dog's body language, and desensitize and counter condition according to your dog's pace.